Hello and welcome to this Isologic presentation on the shipping document for return packages. In this presentation, we will discuss the reasons behind the request for this shipping document for the return of packages, whether they are UN 2910 Class 7 accepted packages or packages that are not classified as hazardous materials.
We will go over the regulations, including all exemptions, as well as the specific requirements for the province of Quebec.
We will start by looking at the CNSC regulations for radioactive materials, specifically the transportation of accepted packages that applies to many of our return cases. Under Section 28 of the regulations for responsibilities and exceptions, we see that the shipper, Isologic's customers, as well as the carrier, Isologic, must comply with the IAEA regulations concerning the requirements and controls relating to the packaging and transport of accepted packages.
The IAEA regulations for the safe transport of radioactive material, 2018 edition, which the CNSC regulations reference, describes the classification of packages as well as specific requirements for accepted packages. In the classification of packages, we see that a package can be classified as an accepted package if it meets the following conditions. An empty package that has contained radioactive materials.
Note that if it can be verified that no possible residue remains, either by decay time or by checking the inside of the container, the empty package can be considered a normal package, in other words, non-regulated.
In the absence of these verifications, the package is classified as an accepted package. An accepted package may also be a package whose activity limits are below the values presented in Table Number 4, in cases where vials or syringes with residues are in the containers. Table 4 covers several physical states and types of radioactive materials. This table therefore applies to return packages where there are radionuclide residues in vials or syringes, or traces of iodine-131 in tungsten containers. Now, under Section 5 of the regulations, we will look specifically at the requirements for the transport of accepted packages. Under the requirements and controls for the transport of accepted packages, only the following paragraphs of Chapters 5 and 6 apply. Among these, we find paragraphs 507 to 513, which are the requirements and controls regarding contamination and leakage, including paragraph 509, which also applies to carriers, regarding the level of non-fixed contamination on the external and internal surfaces of the means of transport, in other words, the vehicle, which must not exceed the limits specified in paragraph 508, as well as paragraph 516 on the limit for the dose rate, paragraphs 530 to 533, and 545, which describe the requirements for marking, labeling, and placarding.
Now, when we go back to the CNSC regulations and look at Section 28.2, which are the exemptions, we see that the consignor can present for road transport and the carrier can also transport by road, a package which is not labeled in accordance with the IAEA regulations. Therefore, only the labeling can be non-compliant for an accepted package. That is, the safety marks like the 3 category labels for Type A packages are not necessary, and therefore no safety marks are affixed to accepted packages. As for the information on the shipment, i.e. the transport document, in Section 29, the exemptions for accepted packages, Section 29(2)(a), indicate that certain information does not need to be included in the transport document. However, the following information must be present: the identity of the sender and the recipient, the UN number of the material being transported, in our case, UN 2910, as well as its proper shipping name, in our case, radioactive material, accepted package, limited quantity of material. The other information does not apply in our case, so there are only these first 3 pieces of information that absolutely must appear on the transport documents under the CNSC exemptions. Additionally, the requirements for transporters state that we need to have a transport document for any shipment of radioactive material, including UN 2910 accepted packages.
Now, when we look at Transport Canada's transportation of dangerous goods regulations for exemptions, we have in Section 1.43, the exemptions for Class 7 radioactive materials, which include accepted packages. Despite several exceptions in Parts 3 to 7, 9 to 12, and 17, we must comply with the CNSC's conditions for transporting accepted packages that we have just seen. Use packages that meet the requirements for accepted packages. In addition, Transport Canada requires that the transport document contain the shipping name and UN number of the goods, as required by the CNSC.
So, we can see that despite all the exemptions from Transport Canada and the CNSC, the shipment of accepted packages requires a document that indicates at a minimum.
Who is the shipper, or consignor? Who is the receiver, or consignee? The UN number of the material, and its proper shipping name.
In addition, the transporter, who may also have other hazardous materials, since the means of transport are not exclusive for accepted packages, must confirm that non-fixed contamination and surface dose rates do not exceed the limits.
And the best way to ensure that the limits are not exceeded is to confirm that the accepted packages are as free of contamination as other types of packages, which are always checked.
We will now discuss other requirements when transporting in Quebec. These do not only apply to dangerous goods, such as Class 7 accepted packages, but to all transported materials.
On the SAAQ website, which ensures that heavy vehicles transporting goods by road comply with laws and regulations, we can also read the regulatory definition of a heavy vehicle. In addition to the intuitive definition of large vehicles and those weighing more than 4,500 kilograms, we see that a road vehicle transporting hazardous materials which requires placarding is also considered a heavy vehicle in the regulations. Since the transport of a single Category 3 yellow radioactive package requires that the transport vehicle be placarded, this vehicle becomes a heavy vehicle, which must comply with these laws and regulations.
Which means that the fleet of small isologic vehicles, which in several circumstances must be placarded because of at least one 3 yellow package, automatically becomes a fleet of heavy vehicles.
Isologic is listed in the SAAQ Register of Owners and Operators of Heavy Vehicles, under the Quebec Ministry of Transport. Once registered as a heavy vehicle, the vehicle remains a heavy vehicle, whether it is placarded 100% or less than 1% of the time. The laws and regulations that apply to heavy vehicles are listed on the Ministry of Transport website. The law provides for monitoring the behavior of owners, operators, and drivers of heavy vehicles. One of the enforcement tools includes the regulations regarding requirements of shipping documents for heavy vehicles.
Now, let's look at the details of the regulations for shipping documents and markings. In Division 2, we are told that shipping documents are required for goods. Note that we are talking about goods in general, not dangerous goods. The details that these shipping documents must contain are described under Section 4. And Section 4 requires at minimum the quantity and description of the goods. Note again, not just dangerous goods, but all goods whatever they may be. The names of the sender, shipper or consignor. The name of the recipient, receiver or consignee. The name of the carrier or transporter. And their identification number with the SAAQ Register of Owners and Operators of Heavy Vehicles. The shipment date. The place of collection of the goods, which means the address of the sender, shipper or consignor, as well as the destination of its journey, i.e., the address of the recipient or consignee. We are audited as owners and operators of heavy vehicles, and all traffic violations also appear in our file with the SAAQ. As can be seen, the violations of Section 4, among several others, are punishable by a fine for the operator of heavy vehicles. And as with driving licenses, there is a maximum number of violations that a heavy vehicle owner and operator can have on their record.
Let's recap. Isologic shipping documents were created because they are mandatory for the transportation of Class 7 hazardous materials, such as UN 2910 return packages, in the CNSC, IAEA, regulations, as well as Transport Canada. For the transportation of all other things, they are mandatory for heavy vehicles regulated by the Quebec Ministry of Transport.
Thank you for having taken the time to watch this short video.
We hope it has provided you with useful insight into the reasons behind the request for the return shipment document.